Today we're going to talk about comparing decimals, and this is different than when we compare place value. This is comparing decimals. Like, you guys have been comparing numbers since you were in the 3rd grade for sure. So this is stuff that we've done way back. We're just adding the component now of the numbers having decimals instead. Okay, so this is going to go on page 34 of your math journal. Very top of page 34. You are going to write comparing decimals. But first, in order to get our brain kind of moving in the right direction, we are going to compare whole numbers, which we should know how to do. So we're going to compare 338 to 327. I want you to pause the video and I want you to do this problem all by yourself. Okay? So I want you to compare 338 to 327. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about how we did it. Well, we're not going to really talk about it. I'm going to talk about how I did it. But I want you to do it. So I really want you to pause the video right now. And I want you to do this with the information that you know how to do this with. 3rd grade math, 4th grade math. Go ahead and use those two things to compare these two whole numbers. Okay, so the way that I know how to do it is I line up my numbers. I line them up by place value because that's the easiest way. So wherever the ones are, I line the ones up. I line the tens up. I line the hundreds, the thousands, and so on. And the reason why I do that is because if a number has a place value that's larger than the other number, that number is automatically larger. So we do that so that it kind of helps us eliminate all of that. So I'm going to line these up. So I've lined them up. My ones place, tens place, hundreds place. And now what I do is I start at my biggest value because, like I said, if this had a 4 in front of it or a 1 in front of it, it would automatically be bigger because it has value in the thousands place. So I always start at my biggest value. And I start there and I look and I think, are these numbers the same? Are they equal? Are they equivalent? Do they equal the same thing? And if they do, then I cross them off because they're not going to help me. Because if they both have 300, it doesn't change. So I cross them off. And then I get to this one and I look and I think the same thing that I just thought. 3 and 2, are they equivalent? If I have $2 and you have $3, do we have the same amount? We don't. So this is where I would stop. I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to look. Well, then I have to think which value is bigger, 3 or 2. Hopefully we're all saying 3. 3 is bigger. So that means that this number is larger. It's greater than this number. So 338 is greater than 327. And how I'm going to show this is I'm going to use my greater than, less than, and equal to symbols. It looks like a Mr. Yuck face. I'm going to show that this is greater than. Okay, and it's greater than because when I read the math sentence, 338 is greater than 327. If these two numbers were flipped, I would use this symbol because the greater number would be over here and the smaller number would be over here. And I would say 327 is less than 338. But because my large value is over here, that's the way my greater than symbol faces. Okay? Hopefully you got the right answer too. It should be kind of something that's jogging your memory a little bit. So today we're going to talk about what happens when these numbers have decimals. Blah! So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our problem so that we have something to solve. We're going to have this number compared to this number. Go ahead and save these two numbers. Pause the video and save these two numbers. And remember, you're writing this down on page 34. You're writing it down. We should have said 48 and 64 hundredths, because that's in the hundredths place, tenths, hundredths, compared to 48 and 68 hundredths, because that's in the hundredths place. So some of us might be like, Ms. Rasham, I already know, but sometimes we don't know, so we're gonna go through all of the steps. So our very first step is going to be line up the decimals. So we're gonna line up the decimals. And why would we line up the decimals? Why did I line up my whole numbers? It's the same exact reason. I lined them up because when I line up my decimals, what does it force all my other values to do? It forces them to line up as well. Because what is always in front of the decimal? Our ones place. And what is always behind our decimal? The tenths place, right? So when we line up our decimals, it forces everything else to get in place value order. That's why we do it. That's why we lined up our whole numbers by the ones place so that they were in place value order. So the very first thing we're going to do is line them up by the decimal. Because this allows us to see, what if this had 100? What if one of these had 100? What if one of them had 1,000? That one is automatically bigger. So we do this so we can see if there's any outlying values in the front. All right, so we lined up our decimals because it forces us to line up our other values. The next thing we're going to do is compare the digits. So what are digits again? Digits are numbers 0 through 9. The biggest digit we can have is 9. The smallest digit we can have is 0. We can't have, 16 isn't a digit. It's a number that's made of digits. So digits are singular numbers. So we're going to compare the digits in the greatest place value. We are going to compare the digits in the greatest place value. Why are we going to do it in the greatest place value? Why don't we start at the smallest one, the hundredths place? Because, like I said, I keep saying, if one of them has a digit that, or has a value in the hundreds place, that one is automatically bigger. It doesn't matter what the other numbers are. Because if this has 100 or 500 or 600 or 200, and this one doesn't and is only in the tens place, this number is automatically larger. Okay? So the reason why we are constantly looking at the greatest value is because we're comparing which number is bigger. Okay? So we're going to compare digits starting with the greatest place. That means that we are going to start on which side of the number. Where are our greatest values? Are they on the left or are they on the right? Think about your place value chart. If I'm going up the place value, are my digits bigger? Or are they bigger when I go down the place value? They're bigger on the left. So that means that we are always going to start on the left. So we're going to start on the left. That means we're going to start right over here on the left. And my greatest place value is what? Not the value, but the place. What is it? It's the tens place. Okay? So we're going to start in the tens place. Step number 3. We are going to cross out if they are equal. Just like I did when I did my 338 compared to 327. we're going to cross out if they are equal values. So if they're equal values, we're going to cross out, and then we are going to repeat until you find values that are unequal to each other. Okay? So I want you guys to pause the video and repeat this. You cross out if they're equal, and then you repeat. You just keep repeating until you find values that are unequal, meaning they are not the same. They are not equivalent. So if they're equivalent, we're getting rid of them because they don't change anything. If both of these numbers have 4 tens, as of right now, they're equivalent. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention. So we're gonna go, we get rid of 4s because they're the same. 4 tens is equivalent to 4 tens. 40 equals 40. We go to the ones place. We have 8 and 8. Well, 8 ones is equivalent to 8 ones. So we're going to get rid of 8 ones. Then, oh my gosh, there's a decimal. What do? We keep going. We go to the tenths place. We look, the value is 6. Well, 6 is equivalent to 6. 6 tenths is equivalent to 6 tenths, right? So we cross it out. Oh, and then we stop when we get to values that are unequal. 4 and 8. Are 4 and 8 equivalent? No. In any capacity, even when we're in hundredths. If I have 8 hundredths and you have 4 hundredths, do we have the same? That means that I have 8 pennies and you have 4 pennies. Do we have the same? No. Even if we're in the tens place, I have 8 tens and you have 4 tens. Do we have the same? No. So we're comparing the values. So we're recognizing that they're different. 4 and 8 are not equivalent. So we're going to stop and we are going to circle it so that we know that that's the place that we're going to compare. Okay? Then our very final step. So very first thing we did was line up the decimals. Go ahead and say it. And why did we do that? We did that because it forces everything else to line up by place value as well. Okay? And that's really what we did. That's really what I did on 338 compared to 327 is I lined them up by the decimals. But if I don't think about how whole numbers have decimals at the end, I lined them up by the ones place, which is really still by the decimal. So we lined them up by the decimal, forcing everything in their place value. Then we compared the digits from the greatest value. The greatest value is going to be on my left, so I make sure I start on my left and work my way down until I find values that aren't equal. So I did that, crossed them off. I crossed out the values if they were equal, and then I got to 4 and 8, and they are not equal. So now what do I do? Step 4. The number with the greatest value is greater. So the number with the greatest value is greater. Well, which value is greater, 4 or 8? 8. So this number right here is greater. 48 and 68 hundredths is greater. So now I have to figure out which way does my symbol go, my sign. Is it greater than? Is it less than? Or is it equal to? Well, they're not equal to, right? So I can disregard that. But I have to look, which side is my big value on? Over here. So my symbol has to face that way. So when we read this math sentence, it says, when we read this math sentence, it says 48 and 64 hundredths is less than 48 and 68 hundredths. Go ahead and repeat that. So that's how you compare decimals. You do it the exact same way you compare whole numbers. The decimal doesn't change anything. It just helps you line them up a little bit better. Okay? So I'm going to give you some practice problems. I want you to get out your whiteboard and follow along with me when we do them. All right? So this is what we're working on this week.